Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerated. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. Had the best words. God bless the United States.
Waldorf Nation, around the nation, welcome to the show. Happy Monday. A little bit of a long break, but it was 100% necessary, so I do thank you for allowing me to do that and take a little time to spend with my family. But we're back. It's Monday. We got stories, plenty of stuff here to occupy our time. And, of course, I missed a lot. Herman Cain. So Herman Cain, pizza guy, 999, dead from coronavirus. Right after, well, not right after, but basically after going to the Tulsa rally, he fought COVID-19 for a month. Missed that story. Missed that. Look, what I'm going to say is going to sound super disrespectful and super awful. So you can just call me an awful person right now, but play stupid games, win stupid prizes. That's what happened. And so there you go. That's what I think about that. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. It seems to happen a lot. Let's see. We've also got people who in Michigan who rail against the coronavirus lockdowns getting coronavirus. There's that. Let's see. Wilford Brimley passed away at 85, the diabetes guy. So that's super sad because he was actually a longtime actor. And so sorry for, or I should say sorry to his family and his loved ones, friends, all that stuff. Look, same to Herman Cain's family as well. So to his family, his friends, all that. I'm sorry for that. My condolences, but at the same time, I feel like that's something that could have been avoided had someone or some people had actually worn masks and taken this thing seriously. And that's what happens. They're not taking this thing seriously. And so that's why we end up having this. Did I get some TLC? I absolutely did. Thank you, Goku. No, it was a good time off. But I did pay a little bit of attention to some of the stuff that was going on. For example, Donald Trump saying that he might delay the election. But we already kind of knew that he was going to say stuff like that, but he doesn't have the authority to do so. And so, yeah, that's scary, but he's also not authorized. And again, we have to go back to how good it is that we actually do have a strong system here in the country. Because if we didn't, then we would be an authoritarian country. We would be a fascist country if we did not have these institutions set up to resist fascism. Louis Gohmert has COVID. I reported on that last week. Again, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Apparently, I mean, as far as I know, William Barr, who was exposed by being next to Louis Gohmert, hasn't tested positive. But then again, we don't know. And they're not exactly being forthcoming about that. So we'll see what happens. So, okay. That's some of the stuff that I missed just from like Friday and Saturday. We've got other stuff. We're going to talk about how peaceful it is in Portland now that Trump's thugs have left. There's that. We also have ICE agents not really happy about being called Nazis. That's fun. We're going to talk about a new ad that just destroys Donald Trump and the Republicans, by the way, on healthcare. I love that ad. It's one of the new Midas Touch ones, and I want to give you my perspective on that. We've got Trump giving giving the Chinese government specifically, or the Trump administration giving them millions of dollars in Paycheck Protection Program funding, while he ironically says like, "Oh, hey, China, they're eating our lunch. They're screwing us over." That's our first story. And then we'll, of course, talk about how Donald Trump I should say the people at Fox News are trying to deny reality. And so that's a really good story on that. So what Trump fears the most is Melania sneaking up behind him with a cheeseburger. No, that would be awesome. I mean, except for the Melania part. But I'm also on a diet, so, there's that. Okay. Anyway. Fun stuff. Let's roll into the stories, I guess. Let's start out with stimulus money going to somewhere it shouldn't. If it's one thing that Donald Trump really hates, is the idea of China eating our lunch, right? That's what he says all the time. China, they're screwing us over so bad. China, they're going to eat our lunch. We're letting them. We're the stupid country, right? As he says that all the time during the Obama administration and also during this administration, which is his own administration, by the way. And it's kind of ironic by the whole thing against China, because his administration just literally let China eat our lunch. That's awesome. Okay. So, by the way, not awesome, but the hypocrisy is there and it's real. All right. So, now on Sunday, let me give you some details about this. The New York Times discovered that members of the Trump administration allowed supplemental money from the Paycheck Protection Program that was part of the CARES Act, right? And so that's the program which is supposed to protect businesses in this country, right? So basically, hey, if you keep jobs in this country where we are, keep people employed, then, well, first we're going to loan you money. And if you keep those jobs, then we're just going to turn it into a grant and you could just have that money to help you survive the coronavirus. Generally, it's a fairly good idea, but it lacks oversight. Okay. And so that is one big problem. I'll actually go into detail about how the Trump administration has actually stopped that, made sure that there wasn't any oversight about this. But first, they allowed this money to be given to China-backed businesses in the United States. And the irony over this is that recently Trump had been going off about TikTok, right? We're going to ban TikTok. We don't like the TikTokers. It sounds too much like a clock. And I don't like, I don't know. I don't know if he doesn't like clocks or not. But okay. Anyway, so now the New York Times did this report based on a study from Horizon Advisory on the publicly available data. Here's what they found. They found that $192 million to $419 million had gone to more than 125 companies that Chinese entities own or invest in. Many of the loans were very sizable. At least 32 Chinese companies received loans worth more than $1 million, with those totaling as much as $180 million. Oops. Hey, what was that about not wanting China to eat our lunch? Like, because that's what we're doing. I mean, from this report, it's less of a China came in, beat us up, and took our lunch money, and more of like we invited China into our house and gave them access to a refrigerator, and they cleaned us out. That's I mean, that's what happened. So now, Horizon Advisory co-founders Emily Delabriere and Nathan Pekarsik wrote this, quote, the extent and nature of PRC, that's People's Republic of China, owned, invested, and connected entities among the PPP loan recipients indicate that without appropriate policy guardrails, U.S. tax dollars intended for relief, recovery, and growth of the U.S. economy, and small business in particular, risk supporting foreign competitors, namely China. Policy guardrails. I can't help but think that maybe one of those guardrails could have been stronger oversight of the PPP program, or technically PP program because it stands for Paycheck Protection Program. You know what I'm saying, right? But it sounds weird saying PP program, especially in the context of Donald Trump. But anyway, moving forward, right? So, okay. Now, the thing about that is Democrats called for stronger oversight. Progressives called for stronger oversight because when the CARES Act passed, there wasn't a lot of transparency. In fact, Republicans had said, we don't want transparency. Well, then how do you know who's going to get the money? How do you, yes, the main concern was, but what if Donald Trump funnels it back to himself through his own businesses? That's why we generally want to know. But in this case, transparency would also show that, hey, man, why are we giving the Chinese Communist government a lot of money? Like, why can't they, since they are essentially an extension of the Chinese state, since it's state-owned business, right? Why isn't the Chinese government bailing out their own businesses here in America to try to save jobs here in America? Right? Why are we doing it? Yes, I understand the motivation is, well, I mean, we got to protect American jobs, right? And so these jobs are in the country. These employers are in the country. And so I guess we got to subsidize them. And so I understand it from that point. But I'm not really arguing against that. What I'm pointing out really is the hypocrisy. Attacking China and say the Chinese, they're eating our lunch while you're literally giving them our lunch. Like what? Almost literally, I guess. I'm probably using the word literally wrong, but basically that's what we're doing here. And so that's the problem. Okay. So now look, back in June, I'm going to show you how the Trump administration has fought against that transparency. Back in June, Democrats penned a letter asking for oversight of this program because they were concerned about people getting bailed out that shouldn't get bailed out. Businesses that aren't actually small businesses, right? Trump, in response to these calls from transparency, actually tried to hide recipients even more. So he knew that this was a problem. He knew that there could be a lot of corruption in this program and misuse. And still he's like, no. I want the corruption. I don't want to find the and expose the corruption. I want to hide the corruption. We're pro-corruption here, in case you didn't notice, in the Trump administration. As long as it helps me. And generally, that's the ethos that Donald Trump really, runs with. As long as it helps me, and I'll show you that later on. But first, according to the New York Times, President Trump, this was an earlier article that came out at the time, had scoffed at oversight, suggesting as he signed the stimulus law that he had the ability to decide what information a new inspector general named to oversee a separate corporate bailout fund could share with Congress. Trump also, in effect, ousted the head of a committee of inspectors general responsible for pandemic oversight, known as the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee, through a demotion. And so he used everything that he could, all of his powers that he was able to do, to remove oversight from that very thing. It's almost as if Donald Trump himself engineered this very problem in order to have China eat our lunch, and then to go and complain about China eating our lunch. But look, let's be honest here. Donald Trump doesn't actually care about that. He doesn't care about China getting millions of dollars in taxpayer funding through the Paycheck Protection Program. He doesn't care about it as long as his family can hide the fact that they also benefited from taxpayer money. Again, going back to the ethos of Donald Trump, if it helps Trump, then it's good. If it doesn't help Trump, it's bad, or Obama, bad. Look, I also believe, personally, that Trump thinks he can fool people into thinking that this is more evidence of China screwing us over, therefore helping his reelection chances, and saying that, hey, if we hand Trump the keys to another 4 years, right, then finally Donald Trump, he's going to get tough on China. Although he already claims that he's gotten tough on China. The other component here, and it's also political, is using racism against Chinese people. All you hear, for example, from Donald Trump when he talks about the coronavirus is, oh, it's the China virus. It's the China virus. And like anytime you want to talk about, okay, but we have a really disastrous response to the China virus, the coronavirus. There's a slip there. We've had a really bad response to coronavirus. What are you going to do about it? Dude, we had a great response. We're doing awesome against the China virus. And that's basically what it is. Okay. And it's classic dog whistle politics. And of course, now he's tying Joe Biden to China and saying that Joe Biden loves the Chinese. In reality, look, the donors, and I'm talking about both Republican and Democratic donors, they like doing business in China. Big corporations love China. Why? Because it's a place where you can exploit labor. And guess what? Before Donald Trump was president, we were also exploiting that labor from China. That's why jobs were going overseas, corporations, and nobody was able to put a stop to them. And guess what? Also before Donald Trump was president, he was one of those donors. I mean, Donald Trump's, or I should say Ivanka's Trump's clothing line was made in China. A lot of Donald Trump's hats, at least the knockoff ones, were also made in China. Although, to be fair, the ones that are officially sold by the campaign, those did get manufactured in America. So there was one of those things, at least, that he was honest about because he knew he'd get called out. And so, nonetheless, the Trumps have had a lot of business in China. Again, going to Ivanka, right? Ivanka Trump gets cheap labor. And so, yes, that's why she makes deals with China. In fact, Trump himself used his position as president to allow Ivanka to get into negotiations with President Xi. And of course, he was able to grant her some pretty special deals when it came to her clothing line. And so that's how she makes millions of dollars. I mean, if that's the idea, if that's Trump's idea of getting tough on China, giving them our money and using our power to negotiate special deals for themselves, then I really wish he'd get tough on American-owned businesses, so that they also get sent millions of dollars. Just saying. All right. Moving on here. Let's go to some polls. You guys like polls. I love polls. Polls are the greatest. Tremendous polls. Or maybe not. So recent polling does not look good for President Donald Trump, even though it has gotten a little bit better in recent weeks. But his reelection campaign still not doing the best, faltering. But don't worry, MAGA folks, because you know what? Jesse Waters is here to tell you how any poll that isn't pro-Trump is fake news.
Forget about the national polls. It's all about the battlegrounds anyway. Most pollsters are undersampling Republicans as high as 10 points. They do that just to depress turnout. Don't fall for it. And just a little perspective, Hillary was beating Trump in every single battleground state going into the 2016 election. What happened? Hillary lost every single battleground state. In addition, national polls showed Hillary crushing Trump.
Why does Jesse Waters sound like he had been drinking? I'm just kind of curious, right? Like I heard a little bit of a slur, like he's had a couple. Maybe so that, he could repeat that utter garbage that he was talking about. So let's get into it. Let's analyze this. So now, look, his argument is, well, Hillary Clinton lost every battleground in 2016, and therefore all of 2020's polls, they're wrong. Oh, okay, but that doesn't really make sense this time around. Why? Well, there's a lot of contributing factors. Turns out there's a lot of context and there's some nuance here. So we're going to get into that. So now let's talk about the factors that led to Hillary Clinton's loss once again, because we haven't went through apparently this enough. So in 2016, you guys remember the mood of the country was a lot different, right? For one, there wasn't a recession, there wasn't a global pandemic, and the candidate last time, Hillary Clinton, was a lot less likable than Joe Biden. This is not my personal opinion. I actually dislike Biden just the same, if not more, than Hillary Clinton. But in general, Hillary Clinton was much disliked. Yes, sexism played a role in that. And not only that, but of course, she went out of her way to alienate progressives. Like Biden's a little bit different. Look, he's basically ignoring progressives and sometimes gives lip service to them while also saying outrageous things like, I would veto Medicare for all. And so, but at least, he didn't say like horrible, horrible things about Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders supporters. So that's the difference, right? So now, that said, substantively, other than just like the mood, right? Substantively, you have most of the country that now prefers government solutions to a lot of our problems. For example, Medicare for all is extremely popular. Over 70% of voters, registered voters, say, yes, Medicare for all. Let's do higher wages. We're now in favor of a universal basic income, things like that. So now I don't think we're going to get any of that with Biden. Maybe we'll get some more stimulus if a Biden administration wins, and if we're still dealing with coronavirus when he takes over, which I think we probably will be. But I feel like the country is a little bit more optimistic, or feels a little bit more optimistic when it comes to him. And I'm saying like the average voter, right? They think that Biden's incrementalist approach is going to help us get closer to some of those things, or at least, that we can push him in a general direction. I don't agree with that necessarily. Personally, I would say there's about a 3% chance you could push Biden on the issues and actually get him to adopt a more progressive stance. 3%. And that's fairly optimistic for me. But there's a 0% chance that you can push Donald Trump in the right direction. And so basically that argument, yeah, it's true, but it's a little moot, right? Because when it comes down to it, I don't see us really going forward with Biden. But at least we will not lurch backwards, which is basically the only argument I can see for Joe Biden. Harm reduction. At least that's my perspective, right? But look, so there's that, right? There's the mood, and there's where the country is when it comes to policy. But there's another difference, right? So now back in 2016, nobody knew how much of a garbage fire, a dumpster fire Donald Trump was going to be. Nobody knew, except, for us in independent media, because we warned you guys. We told you it's going to be a dumpster fire. But mainstream corporate media did not say that. They said, well, we'll see if he becomes a standard corporatist Republican, because they're in favor of that generally, right? Well, we saw how that went. Instead of the party changing him, he changed the party into what is basically his own cult, which is not a surprise because generally conservatives are authoritarians. By nature, they'll fall in line to what the donors and the leaders tell them to do. But now the country can see coronavirus rampaging throughout the communities. 40 million people are out of work. Unemployment has run out. 11 to 12 million people are now in danger of losing their homes. And the president is talking about how this is a Democratic hoax and we need to ban TikTok. because priorities, right? But see, most of the people see Trump for who he is and what he's done. That's why he's got a 43% approval rating and a near 57% disapproval rating. That's an absolute disaster. Nobody wins re-election with these kinds of numbers. Okay. So you want to make a comparison between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. It's a little bit asinine, right? The 2016 and 2020 elections so far, it's just the numbers don't add up. Now, the national polling, as I said before, wasn't wrong generally in 2016. It was just a lot closer. You had Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump a lot closer in the polling. It never was going to be a blowout. But now, at least in national polling, you see blowout numbers. And even some of the swing states, you see blowout numbers. Now, let me give you the numbers from last election, right? So now the Real Clear Politics showed former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton beating Trump nationally by 3.2%. She actually won by 2.1%. So that's not very far off, except that what it was is that it was in the margin of error. And also, it didn't account for the Electoral College. She won the popular vote. She did not win the Electoral College. And again, that goes back to the swing states. And that's actually the one thing that I agree with Jesse Waters on, where he's like, well, I mean, it's the swing states that really matter. Well, in these close elections, absolutely, these swing states are important. And so we'll talk about that. And so what happened is in 2016, they got it wrong in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Donald Trump was able to get the gain the electoral victory by some pretty slim margins, right? They didn't count on likely voters as well as Obama to Trump voters. They, or count the effects of voter suppression, which is always present and should be factored into every election. And the fact that Hillary Clinton did not campaign in these states. And here you had these states that went to Trump, which means electorally, Donald Trump got a win. But that also means that Trump's win was kind of weak to begin with. He never had the popular vote. And so now his fortunes had reversed in a lot of these states, in these battleground states. So you look at Biden's numbers, right? At least nationally, he leads by more than 7 points. But in a lot of states, he still has an at least 5-point lead. Now, the comparison is bad. Jesse Waters should probably know that this is bad. But here's the thing. Jesse Waters is really catering to an audience of one. Trump, he watches Fox News. He sees that their own polls are stacked against him. But then here comes bootlicking Jesse Waters to say, no, Donald, it's okay. It's fake news. Fake polls. You're going to win bigly. So don't worry. Don't do anything about that. So, okay. You know what? I actually think that there's something else to this as well. I think Jesse Waters and the Republican establishment are worried about Donald Trump seeing that these terrible poll numbers and deciding to take his ball and go home. I mean, you guys remember the reports, right? Remember how triggered Donald Trump was when TikTok teens sabotaged his Tulsa rally? He's now out there trying to ban TikTok from the country, which, look, don't use TikTok. It is a Chinese app. It does, and it's not bad because it's a Chinese app, but because they do generally spy on their users. I know. Same thing with Facebook. I get it. I guess all social media really kind of spies on people. But I guess if it's our own government and our own corporatist, corporate overlords, then we're good. But not the Chinese corporate overlords. I understand the hypocrisy in that argument, but generally, yeah, that's what he's trying to do. And so that's because he was triggered. Not that he's not actually cares about Americans' private information going to another foreign government or to a corporation. He's not worried about any of that. No, it's just about China, right? Okay. Anyway, so now why is he worried about this, right? Why is Jesse Waters, at least according to my theory, wanting Trump to worried about Trump dropping out? Because it would be an epic disaster for the party, right? the whole party would implode into infighting. Look, that's what would happen if Donald Trump drops out, because then somebody would have to take his place, someone would have to take the mantle, and you forget that over 80% of Republicans have a favorable view of Donald Trump. They massively love the guy. And so whoever the establishment in the Republican side tries to put up, they're probably not going to like, at least not at first. And so I think there would be a complete electoral disaster, especially this close to the election. Having that happen, and then it would just destroy them down ballot, down ticket. They do not want that to happen. Their best case scenario right here is to let Donald Trump lose. Have him run, have Biden crush him, right? And then they can claim, oh, look at all the voter fraud. Wow, of the fake news, deep state took the election from us. What are we going to do? Right? And so whatever, all in order to keep the party united. And that's what they're really concerned about right now, as far as I think, right? I think the Republican establishment is not as concerned about Donald Trump losing, but about the longevity of the actual party apparatus. And so there's that. Mitch McConnell, he's worried about a wipeout in Congress. He's not worried about Trump losing their power, their base, having all those Trump supporting Republicans basically do a Republican or a Rexit, right? And they're worried about that. They're worried all that's going to happen if Donald Trump drops out of the election. Again, total speculation on my part, but it makes sense to me, right? And that's why these Republicans would rather choose to ignore the reality of polls, even when the polls are Fox News polls. So that's just my speculation. All right. So I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll come back. We got a new an anti-Trump ad that I enjoy. And so I will share that with you guys, and then I will comment on it as usual. So stay with me. We're coming back right after the break. I'm going to thank some patrons and read some super chats if we have one or any, and do all that stuff. So stay right here around the nation.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Mike Pounds.
Why, you're getting nervous, man.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Welcome back to the show. Round the Nation, Waldorf Nation. All right, so it's funny. I saw you guys talking about this earlier in the chat. You guys are great. Waldorfians. That's really funny. Kind of like it. Really interesting. So, all right. Also, a lot of comments about or I should say more questions about my relationship with the Young Turks. Still part of the TYT network, just a rebrand. We still have the same relationship with the Young Turks that we had before. It's just a little bit more apparent this time to cut down on the confusion, right? We are our own independent entity, but we have a partnership with TYT, same as Kyle Kolinsky from Secular Talk and the Humanist Report. And so, that's why it like kind of proves that we definitely needed to do a rebrand. And so to cut down on that confusion. All right. Anyway, so first I want to thank a couple of patrons. That's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, Martha Dillard, and Aaron Kiernan. Thank you to those patrons. You can go to the link if you want to sign up in the description of this live stream and the descriptions of all of our videos as well. All right. So thank you to those patrons. Super chats here. Got plenty of those. Tango Bangle says, Top Dem warns Trump making plans to remain in office even if he loses. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Okay. Look, no matter what, the guy's either, if he decides he's going to say, he's going to get dragged down to his ass, right? Now, I think that when he leaves, and he will leave, he will complain, bitch and moan, go to Twitter, call things fake news, all that stuff, in order to protect his ego. And so that's what it is. It's all about his ego. That's what who Donald Trump serves as himself. Okay. Anyway, a couple more super chats. Again, once Dango Bangle says, don't stop protesting under Biden. Agreed. Keep them going. Keep them energetic. Bully the ruling class and the left and have the pitchforks ready. Yeah, basically that's the only plan. That's all we got. Electoral politics is not our only weapon in our arsenal. That's not how that's not how policy gets passed, unfortunately. You've got to go outside the system. Like, you've got to protest. You've got to make your voice heard. That's what spurs politicians into action and actually doing legislation. So there's that. Torn Tokoroa says, stop insulting dumpster fires. Here in New York, we consider them to be honorable and dignified. And unlike Trump, they don't have daddy issues. Fair enough. Star Trek says, when Biden does get elected, and I hope that he does, that does not mean we stop because it's not over. There will be still a lot wrong in America. Oh, that's what I'm saying. And we got to keep fighting. I know, like, the brunch crowd is going to go back to sipping mimosas, in their fancy beach houses. But we're still going to be fighting because there are still going to be things that are wrong. And so we're never going to give up until we get healthcare for everybody, higher wages, college that's free at the point of service. And so all of that, like education, housing, human rights, all of it. And so we're actually going to do something about it. Unlike the mimosa, generally the vote blue no matter who crowd. All right. Let's see. Channel memberships, I want to thank our two newest members, Trevor Watson and OL123. Thank you for joining and supporting independent progressive media. You guys are great, guys and gals. All right. Let's move on. Let's talk healthcare. Remember that guy? Remember Paul Ryan? Seems like a lifetime ago. It was only halfway through his administration. All right, anyway. So we now have another. Let's try that again. we have a great new video from Midas Touch that hits Trump and his promises to bring us what he called amazing, tremendous health care. Take a look.
When we win on November 8th, we will be able to immediately repeal and replace Obamacare. My first day in office, I'm going to ask Congress to put a bill on my desk. I hope we're going to surprise you with a really good plan. You can end up with great health care for a fraction of the price, and that's going to take place immediately after we go in, okay? Immediately. On my first day, you're going to be very proud of what we put forth having to do with health care. I know that we're all going to make a deal on health care. That's such an easy one. Form a really great plan.
You've been in office 3.5 years. You don't have a plan.
Well, we haven't had, excuse me, you heard me yesterday. We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks. A full and complete health care plan. I've been saying this for a long time.
All right. I love that. Healthcare. It's so easy. It's going to be so easy, and everybody's going to have healthcare. What happened? What happened? I thought we were going to have great healthcare. Everybody's going to be covered. Really? Well, that didn't happen, because we could really use that right now. We could use healthcare that covers everybody, insurance for everybody during a pandemic. It's not like the American people don't want it. No, polling shows that 70% of Americans support improving and expanding Medicare for everyone. I mean, Medicare, we already have it. It works. People like it. It can be improved. And, it turns out there's a plan to improve it. Oh, right, but it's Bernie Sanders' plan. And he's not running for president anymore. So now Biden isn't doing that either. And Trump, 100%. Not doing that. In fact, we saw exactly what Trump and the Republicans wanted to do with healthcare, and we rejected it 100%. Okay. And so what Trump did, and we'll go to the substance here, is you guys remember that for the first 2 years, President Trump and the Republicans had complete control of Congress. They had the time where they could put together a pretty great healthcare plan, right? As they say. What did they do? Well, they cut taxes for the rich instead. And not only that, but he also defunded the ACA. And then finally, after so much pressure, the Republicans scrambled to put together a plan that was somehow even worse than the ACA. Remember, I say worse than the ACA because generally the ACA was fairly bad. Better than what we had, true. That doesn't make it a good plan, right? And you know why it wasn't a good plan? Because it was their plan to begin with. And the Democrats, President Obama, essentially stole it from Mitt Romney, right? And so somehow we got under Trump, or would have got under Trump if it weren't for the late John McCain, we would have got something far worse than that. Okay. And so if you guys forget or had forgotten about what was in Trumpcare, it basically was a series of tax cuts, tax credits, high risk pools, no real guarantee of pre-existing conditions, despite, of course, lying about it, and focusing on health savings accounts. So the problem with health savings accounts is that we live in a country right now where 40% of Americans, this was pre-pandemic, right? Where 40% of Americans could not afford a $400 emergency. 60% of Americans could not afford a $1,000 emergency, which $1,000 is less than a lot of deductibles in these insurance plans. So now, if you can't do that, if you can't afford a $400 emergency, then how the hell can you contribute to a health savings account? It's kind of impossible, okay? And look, that was a Republican plan. It went over like a lead balloon. And of course, here's why. Because it was a hastily put together non-plan. And so the whole Republican strategy was not to come up with real solutions. No, the whole Republican strategy was run against Obamacare because Obama bad. And they used people's misunderstandings of the ACA, right? First, they called it Obamacare. And so people didn't know the distinction. People didn't know the actual name of the legislation. In fact, there were reporters that went down to Kentucky. Now, Kentucky had set up a state exchange, right, called Connect. And it was actually pretty popular with Kentucky residents. They were able to buy a plan, right? And they generally were like, okay, yeah, we like this, right? This is better than what we had. And then they asked people, I said, well, okay, what do you think about the ACA? What do you think about the Affordable Care Act? What do you think about Kentucky's Connect? And they're like, oh, yeah, I like it. Yeah, it works out. It's pretty good. What do you think about Obamacare? Hate it. Hate it. That's socialism. Oh, wait a minute. Same thing. In fact, Connect was only created because of Obamacare. And so Republicans took advantage, as they often do, of people who don't know facts, right? People who are misinformed or disinformed. And there it is. And so people also didn't like the individual mandate. I didn't like the individual mandate either. But it was a linchpin of the ACA. It was a necessary idea, but it was implemented very badly because what it did is that it did punish people who couldn't afford insurance. I mean, it punished people who were not, poor enough to get Medicaid, or of course in states that also didn't expand Medicaid. But it also the same people who couldn't get Medicaid, but also couldn't afford expensive health insurance. Those people got screwed, and so they were not happy about this. Okay, but the Republicans, they used all that to run against the ACA for the last 10 years. They had no plan themselves. Actually, about 12, it was about 10 years. And the reason they couldn't go against the ACA is because it was their own plan. And they wanted to use cheap political points to get back into power. And it worked with Donald Trump. And you could see that they had no plan, just vapid, empty bullshit. And that's what it was. Their plan, as Alan Grayson put it, generally is don't get sick. And if you do, die quickly. Die quickly. And the Republicans, again, failed. 100%. So now, that said, were the Democrats a lot better? Well, okay, let's look at it, right? So Democrats, generally, like different wings of the party, have better ideas, right? So now, the best idea is Medicare for all, okay? They've got that idea, and it's incredibly popular. Over 88% of Democrats support that plan. And yet, the party apparatus does not want to do it. They don't want to do Medicare for all because the money they get from healthcare companies. And of course, you have pushback from union bosses who in some cases get kickbacks from selling private health insurance to their members. The obvious choice here is Medicare for all. I mean, you've seen it from the pandemic, right? I mean, the average, and this blows my mind, right? And it should blow your mind. The average COVID-19 treatment is around $70,000. That's how much it costs. Why do we not have universal health care? That's what we need. We need Medicare for all. Because here's the thing. When this pandemic is over, right, and it's not going to be over for some time, after the smoke clears, you're going to have tens of thousands of Americans with, number one, medical debt that they're never going to be able to afford from getting treatment for coronavirus, right? Not only that, there's a recent report out that looked at the damage, long-lasting permanent damage to people's organs, hearts, lungs, kidneys, damaged from the coronavirus, right? Some of those conditions will require treatments, medications for the rest of their lives. And if you cannot afford insurance or you have a gigantic deductible to pay, well, then you are absolutely screwed. So the only solution here is single payer. So when you look at the difference here, yes, you've got Republicans who are an absolute disaster, who have absolutely no plan, which is why they should never be voted back into office. But then also, you look at the Democrats who have better plans, but refuse to enact them and support them even though the fact that a massive majority of the American people and their voters want that plan. And so, look, I understand that in this election, the choice is obvious. But going forward, we need to support Democrats who support Medicare for all. And so never let Republicans back into power, because this is what they do. They have no plan. But be careful about who you choose as Democrats. That's all I'm saying. All right. I'm going to try to get through this. It turns out that agents of ICE don't like being called Nazis, even when they do Nazi-esque things. Fun. All right, so now let me give you some context on this. So a pair of filmmakers was able to get access to film and talk to ICE agents, and basically allowed them to share their stories, right? And so what we get from that is a lot of irony. So now these filmmakers are Charles Schwartz and Christina Kluschau, and they were allowed to follow federal officers and agents, according to Newsweek, as they enforced Trump's administration's most controversial immigration policies, including the government's zero tolerance policy of family separation at the border. So now these ICE agents, they spoke to Newsweek, they spoke to these people, these filmmakers, and what they had to say was actually pretty interesting. So now first they talk about what policy that they're using. And this matters, right? So one ICE supervisor in this documentary said, start taking collaterals. Now, what are collaterals? Well, collaterals are essentially undocumented immigrants identified during a targeted arrest, right? So now they target people, and if there happen to be undocumented immigrants around, the collaterals are basically those people, right? So they go and grab the target, and then if they find anyone else undocumented, they grab them too, even though they haven't really actually done anything wrong other than be in the country illegally, right? And so there's that. And so these ICE agents are like, no, we need to target more collaterals. Bring me more collaterals. I must have more, right? And so, of course, there's a reason for that. There's bragging rights. Apparently, they think it's freaking awesome to go and drag people out who haven't done anything wrong, even though they're supposed to. At least this is what Donald Trump and Republicans claim. You're supposed to go after the criminals and the bad people, the bad hombres. Well, they're not going after the bad hombres. They're also getting the collaterals for people that haven't done anything wrong while staying in this country. And so these guys are bragging about bringing them in. Speaking with individual agents, Schwartz and Kluschau found that some appeared contrite over their role in enforcing Trump's crackdown, while others were defending their work. One agent in New York told the filmmakers, quote, "It's like too much," describing how ICE agents had gone from arresting less than 8 people a week under the Obama administration to making more than 8 arrests in a single day. Quote, "It's like the floodgates opened and no one's used to this. It's not like, okay, we went back to the way we were. We were never like this. It's a different world." Another agent complained about being seen as the bad guys in society. Quote, "We constantly look like we're the bad guys when all we're doing is enforcing the laws and doing our job. It gets to me sometimes because I feel like, we have no respect." Oh, you're upset because people think you're the bad guy. Who the hell do you think you are? You're separating families. You're abusing immigrants in jails. You're destroying supplies for people who just crossed a dangerous stretch of desert. You guys are the bad guys. You are the bad guys. And I know they're like, well, we're just doing our jobs. Oh, okay, that's the Nuremberg defense. Because, I can't believe people would just call us terrible things because we're doing terrible things. Oh, man. I mean, that's literally what Nazis have said. Did you just need to go in these camps? What? I'm just doing my job. Why are you calling me a Nazi? It's just enforcing the law. Excuse me. No, you have a choice. You could quit. Why don't you just quit? Stop being an agent. But as you're going to see, they love what they do. In fact, the administration, according to the agent, says they've changed. The administration has changed, and now we're finally allowed to do our jobs. To be honest with you, I honestly still cannot believe that he's our president. It's the best thing and worst thing that could have happened to us. Another agent said, quote, ICE isn't a fan favorite of anybody's. Word like Nazis, how can you do this? We're used to it. And I mean, I love my job. I do. I have a good, stable home and I make money. Oh, good for you. Wow. That's so nice. Destroying people's lives for a fascist. Good for you. Well, I'm glad that you're doing okay. That same agent, of course, went in, against criticisms for people comparing ICE to Nazis. The agent said, quote, to be called a Nazi, a racist, it's just ignorant. It's just ignorant. Oh, really? He said, quote, we don't pick and choose groups of people based on race, color, religion. We just look for people who are removable. Really? Well, those people who are removable, they almost always happen to be people of color. Or people, based on their religion, right? Where they would go after, or wanted to go after the Muslims, for example. Now, look, I'm sorry you don't like being called a Nazi, but maybe you shouldn't be surprised that when you do fascist things, you get called a fascist. I'm just saying. You guys remember the Facebook posts, right? From these some of these border agents. There's a group of about 9,500, I believe, current or former Border Patrol agents, and it wasn't necessarily all of them were current or former. Could be family members or friends, but generally there was this group was full of Border Patrol people. Were saying some of the worst things about immigrants. For example, in this group, just weeks before the death of a father and his daughter while crossing the Rio Grande captured national attention, Border Patrol Facebook groups were filled with posts about alligator sightings in the river, saying, quote, medieval solutions to a modern problem. Let's stock the river with gators. This needs to be crowdfunded. Can the river ecosystem support sharks? Huh. Oh, that's real funny, right? Super funny, right? Talking about immigrants being eaten by alligators and sharks. That's top tier comedy, guys. Really. Another agent lamented about his chance or missing his chance to shoot an immigrant. Another posted, they're like wild animals. Stop feeding them and they won't hang around and shit on the street. Verbatim. And you guys also remember the most famous examples of this, the post from this group was about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When she went to go visit a border encampment, they said all sorts of terrible things about her, even photoshopping images of her, doing sexual things to Donald Trump. And so forcibly. And so it's just incredibly gross. And this came primarily from the 1015 border group. 1015, by the way, is code for when they catch an undocumented immigrant and have them in custody. They also called them tonks, immigrants. Why did they do that? Well, because tonk is the sound it makes, they say, when you hit an immigrant in the head with a nightstick. Yeah. Oh, but no, we don't like being called racist. Yeah, it's so ignorant that you would call us racist or make a comparison that we're Nazis. Do Nazi shit, be called a Nazi. That's what's going to happen. I mean, methinks thou doth protesteth too much on that. So that said, there are some employees that said that they were uncomfortable with this. One says most of our targets are criminals. That's where the collaterals are kind of like, kind of the victim. It's an unfortunate situation because a lot of these guys are hardworking individuals. They're here to work and provide for their family. They just get caught up in politics. If you look at it, it's how it is. Well, no, it's not how it is. Again, you can see what a lot of these people actually think, that they actually really do enjoy their job. Another ICE fugitive operations agent, however, said he refuses to arrest collaterals. He says, I don't do collaterals. I just don't think it's right. If I get somebody that's not cooperative, it's a different story. But if you let me come into your house and talk to me, I'm not going to roll your fingerprints and arrest you for being here illegally. I know it's my job, but I got guys that are aggravated felons and that I'd like to catch. I don't care about the guy that's minding his own business and cooperating with me. Another person was not happy about performing arrests that see families separated. Quote, it gets sensitive when the kids are involved. I'm a dad. It's tough when the kids are involved. Nobody wants to see children hurt. Sometimes it happens. It's not very nice, but that's the law. Well, okay, but here's the thing, right? That's not a justification for doing that. A bad law is a bad law, period. And you've got the option of resigning in protest until those laws are changed. You could do something. You could actually do something. But instead, sure, you're going to sit here and talk about how it's not fair, how it sucks. Oh my gosh, I can't believe all the terrible things that we're doing. But also still benefiting from that, still making money, still living in your nice house, driving your nice car, and not really giving up anything. I mean, sure, the one guy says, well, at least I don't do collaterals. Okay, that's better. You could definitely refuse to do that. But you're not really changing the system. You're not really changing the overall atmosphere, of this agency. And so it continues the status quo where people are getting hurt. But hey, I feel bad about it. No, not good enough. Not good enough. Look, this agency shouldn't exist. Abolish ICE. That's it. Period. Abolish ICE. And look, if maybe we should use the money to fix the conditions in which, in this country and in other countries that cause immigration like this in the first place. Again, a lot of these people are here because, first, there are huge problems in these Central American countries. For example, poverty, gang violence, drug violence, corruption in the government, things like that. People that, are really living in fear of their own lives. Why don't we do something about that? But Jeff, that's not our problem, right? No, it is our problem. It is. For one, it's partly or mostly our fault. I mean, the drug war has ravaged Central American countries. Our drug war. Not only that, we got to end the giant corn subsidies, right? You might think, wait, corn subsidies? What are you talking about? We subsidize the shit out of corn. That's why everything you eat is made out of corn syrup or has some sort of corn product in it, right? And so that subsidizing, us doing that, the government doing that, basically made it so that Mexican farmers, they couldn't make money selling their corn on the world market. And so they stopped doing it. And so they were not able to make a living in these areas. And so what else are they going to do? What else are they going to do? Well, they're going to have to go somewhere where they can actually make a living. Mexico is full of drug violence as well, spurred on again because of our drug war. And you've got, again, a lot of these governments in Central America and South America that are affected by our drug war. And not just our drug war, but we also seem to have this habit of overthrowing leftist or left-leaning leaders in these Latin American countries and in helping them install right-wing leaders that do gigantic human rights abuses that for some reason people want to escape. Who knew? And they will come to America to escape or go through America to go to Canada. And so that's what we're doing. Maybe we should stop doing that. Stop destabilizing and deposing left-wing South American governments or Central American governments and replacing them with fascists. We should stop doing that. We contributed to a lot of these problems. And so, yeah, it is partly on us to fix it. Or at least at the very least to take in the people and make citizens those whose countries we actually ultimately destroy. It's just a bare minimum. All right. One more here, real quick. The city of Portland has returned to peace after federal agents left a courthouse. This is according to reports. So now, look, Portland has been protesting for quite some time, since May 31st, over the death of George Floyd. Not only that, but of course, over the police brutality in general, Black Lives Matter. And so there were protests going on for quite some time. So now we've been hearing about Portland. That's why we've been hearing about Portland for a while. And mainly also why we've been hearing about violence in Portland. But of course, the violence was really instigated by police. First, Oregon police or Portland police, and then later on, federal agents that came in to try to quell the riots or quell the protests, which, by the way, there are actually very few riots. They got way, way more media coverage than the damage that they actually inflicted, and did not last very long. But here's the thing. These federal agents came in, and they basically started causing more problems. And so that's what happened, right? They've been going against these, the majority of peaceful protesters, attacking them, firing tear gas, beating protesters, attacking journalists, and on and on and on. Basically escalating the situation. Even though, as I mentioned before, yes, you had a little bit of looting, you had a little bit of vandalism, some of which, of course, could certainly be the fault of agitators. For example, Umbrella Man, right? Umbrella Man was recently outed as a white supremacist. That went and started problems. And so there are people definitely tied in with white supremacist groups that were doing the actual vandalism, doing the actual looting. And so as a result of that, you had a massively unequal response from police. Again, tear gas, attacking protesters, attacking the press. It's almost as if the federal agents were precipitating this violence. Super weird, right? So now things got better once the police stopped attacking protesters. Wow. Who could have imagined? Who could have imagined? So now Governor Kate Brown decided she would do a deal to replace federal agents guarding this specific courthouse. This is the Mark O. Hatfield Federal Courthouse. And so I guess the reason is there were people that were targeting this, allegedly targeting this courthouse. And so it's a federal building, and that's what allowed Donald Trump to send in the troops as well. And so these are members of DHS. These are members of ICE because they're also within 100 miles of a border. And so they were allowed to do that. And these people were answerable basically to Donald Trump. And so that's why they were allowed to do so. But nobody wanted them there. The governor didn't want them there. The mayor didn't want them there. The protesters didn't want them there. Again, all they were doing was basically escalating the situation and actually causing more violence. And so that's a big problem. So now Trump, he says he wants to keep troops there, as does acting Homeland Secretary, Security Secretary Chad Wolf. Here's his statement on this. Quote, "The department will continue to maintain our current augmented federal law enforcement personnel in Portland until we are assured the Hatfield Federal Courthouse and other federal properties will no longer be attacked and that the seat of justice in Portland will remain secure." And last week, Donald Trump gave an ultimatum to Governor Brown saying that he needed that she needed to, quote, clean out this beehive of terrorists. Terrorists. So this is the same people. This is the same guy who said, Charlottesville. Good people on both sides. Where someone literally ran over a protester. Oh, no, great people on both sides. Whereas the protesters here that are largely peaceful, those are the beehive of terrorists. You've got to be kidding me. That's garbage, absolute bullshit. And so, by the way, this was a 48-hour ultimatum where he says, clean up the terrorists or send the National Guard. That did not happen, thankfully. In fact, once these federal officers, which, by the way, they have been replaced. They haven't pulled up, but they have been replaced by Portland State Police, and they've largely been kept out of sight. So these police officers, these federal agents, were not on the streets. They were not on the streets. They were just defending the courthouse. And so, you know what happened? Peaceful protest in front of the courthouse, but peaceful. That's what happens when you don't trample people's First Amendment rights. You allow people to protest. You allow people to assert their rights. You allow people to do peaceful protest. You don't fire tear gas. You don't attack journalists. You don't do any of that stuff. And this is what you get. You get peaceful protest. I wish more people would understand that. But here's the thing. Nobody wants looting or violence, right? It's a bug. Nobody wants looting or violence, okay? Nobody. And so, I mean, again, we understand sometimes to protect property, right? I get that. But we need to also protect people's First Amendment rights. We need to make sure to protect people. And so, and to not kidnap people, right? As some of you in the chat point out. The government has been doing all this stuff. And so they've been doing the complete opposite of what we need to do to solve the problem. And so I am glad, that they have pulled out or are pulling out of Portland. They're getting out of Portland and not doing what they should, what they have been doing before. But they shouldn't have done this in the first place. They should know that putting violence in is not going to solve anything. All right. Anyway, so there you go. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. But those buildings were totally destroyed by graffitis. Yeah. 10 years for graffiti on a federal building. That's absolutely ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. And so, no. The Trump administration, authoritarians, all of them. Okay. That's it. Thank you guys. Please subscribe to the channel. Please go to our Facebook page if you haven't already, if you're okay with Facebook. I know some of you are not. But help us get to 10,000 so we can get some ads. Helps us out with our, basically being able to run the show. I need to get a new computer because I cannot stream. Like, I'm already streaming both to YouTube and to Facebook. My computer can stream no more. Stream no more. All right. I want to stream on Twitch, and every time I've tried, I do not have enough computer power. So unfortunately, I cannot do that. Not unless I am able to replace this computer. So, or upgrade it with something else. And getting ads on Facebook, getting to 10,000 followers, that will help. Patreon, patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. And of course, super chats and all that stuff. So, all right. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Have a good afternoon. See you guys later.
Mike Pounds.
police squad.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Why? You're getting nervous, man.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.